Hello and welcome to StateScoop's Priorities Podcast. I'm Colin Wood, StateScoop's Editor-in-Chief. This week, a look at how Kansas transformed its unemployment insurance system. But first, here's what's happening. New York City this week announced a new pilot program that integrates a new emergency alert system with the city's public schools. The system, which leaders claim is the first of its kind in the United States, provides an automated method of contacting 911 in the event of an active shooter scenario or other threats. As the federal government shutdown stretches on, state agencies are grappling with technical, financial, and policy adjustments following a federal directive to pause processing of SNAP benefits next month. Nearly all states and territories have submitted their final proposals to the federal government, detailing how they plan to spend their allotments of the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. Given recent adjustments to how the program is administered, though, the current proposals could leave roughly half of the program's $42 billion unspent. This week, we hear from Kansas Labor Secretary Amber Shultz. She walks us through how the state's unemployment insurance system went from struggling to recently winning a NASCIA award for its performance.
Taking everybody back to 2022 with state unemployment insurance systems, there were so many challenges. There's too many to name, but I'll highlight a few. I think to take you back even a little bit further. So prior to the pandemic, the system was sufficient. It did what it was supposed to do, even though when Governor Laura Kelly came in as governor of the state of Kansas, they identified the unemployment insurance system as a system of risk. So we were already planning to replace that system. But at the time, the norm was like 3 to 5 years. And we had done upgrades to the existing system, and that had, and simply because also the age of the system, the core system, kind of left us with a house of cards. Like it was just ready to crumble at any time. And so we knew this, and again, we're in active planning stages for replacing that system. And then the pandemic hit. And so normally economic turndowns are very gradual. And the state of Kansas, our unemployment rate went from a record low of around 3% to over 11% literally overnight. And another example is on a typical day before the pandemic, we answered about 1,500 calls. And then late March of 2020, we were answering 1.3 million. We had received 1.3 million calls a day. And so the system itself was built in the 70s. So think Star Wars was just taking off. Disco was alive. The Walkman and Post-it notes were high tech. And we had 5 fragmented systems that were all duct tape and bubblegum together. And so that meant for claimants and employers, our online system was really difficult to navigate, resulting in more calls to our contact center. And our contact center representatives, they couldn't use a mouse, and they had to memorize all these hundreds of weird short codes that they used for abbreviation back in those days. And then the code was not documented, and it was in a lot of people's heads that had long since retired. So we had to reverse engineer a lot of processes. The system governance was pretty much non-existent. We had duplicate data, duplicate systems of records. Where was that one source of truth? And you can only imagine how that impacted the integrity of our unemployment insurance system.
Yeah, I'm sure it was great back when people were wearing bell bottoms, but that's although those are coming back, I think. I don't know.
This is true.
The project was completed in November 2024. Can you run us through some of the highlights of the implementation and some of the key project outcomes?
Sure. So, as I was leading up to kind of just a minute ago, this project was critical and urgent. And not only because the old system couldn't meet our business needs, but it was ripe for failure. It was ready to just crumble. And so first and foremost, what we had to do was we developed and maintained those positive relationships with all of our stakeholders. So I've always said that if there's any silver lining to the pandemic, everybody was on board to the criticality of this project. So our legislature, our business community, the governor's office, all of our constituents, they understood that need for urgency. And more importantly, I think, believed in our strategy. And then for me, as a steward of tax dollars and the custodian of state services, the fact that, the highlight for me really boils down to that it remained on time, on budget, and within scope. And it was the fastest implementation ever of any state makes me very, very proud. So I'll give you just a couple examples of where we're seeing this, not just with the system itself, but the folks that are managing it. So the training is easier. It used to take us about 8 weeks to simply get a person to the point where they could answer the phone. And now it's about 2 weeks. So our employee retention has increased, and we have more bandwidth to train those customer service agents and more system functionality. It's a domino effect. More people being able to help more employers, more claimants. It's snowballing, and it's been tremendous for our agency. But we've also implemented an architecture that allows us to be agile, to expand and contract something that we didn't have during the pandemic, because we know that there's going to be another economic turndown. And then we've implemented the technology to be on the forefront of fraud prevention, detection, and recovery to protect that personal information of Kansas employers and workers. And then also it's a very flexible system, and it's configurable. And that is a win, because we're able to add new modules and functionality, and we're able to exchange, share code, data, test scripts with other states that are also using the system. So it's saving us all time and money.
Right. So when it took 8 weeks to train someone previously, was that just because the system was so much more complicated, as you described, all the short codes and whatnot?
Yeah, it was incredibly complex. So every customer service agent had to have about 5 different screens open at any one time, simply to gather information and respond and interact with the claimant or an employer. Like I said, they couldn't use a mouse, so they had to keyboard, tab their way over. Because back in the 70s, storage space was precious. You used short codes for things to relay back to like a lookup table. And so they had to memorize all of those so that they could be able to assist claimants and employers. So it was very, very cumbersome.
Right. Yeah, totally unnecessary. Now it reminds me of when you go to the grocery store and they're trying to remember the code for turnips or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we need that anymore. We have plenty of storage space.
Yes.
So to what do you attribute some of those projects wins? So you mentioned the fast implementation. I don't remember if you mentioned the UI specifically, but that was called out in your award application, the fast UI implementation. How did you succeed?
So I think we had really 5, keys to success. The first was we were an agency that was able to respond quickly in this time of crisis. We already had a good framework from what Governor Kelly had done when she had come into office. And so we knew kind of those guardrails of what we needed for this new system. It wasn't something that we had done and just stuck on a shelf and waited for that economic downturn. The second was that we really wanted to optimize our uptime and user experience. So we're experiencing about 100% uptime right now, with almost 0% unplanned downtime. Compared to with the old system, it was 65% down or uptime. So 35% of the time, claimants and employers couldn't access the system, and that was because it was a batch processing. So we'd have to shut it down every night, do all these batches, bring it back up in the morning, and that didn't even begin to address we always called it the gremlins in the mainframe. That one day, we didn't do anything to the mainframe. It just decided that morning it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, with our old system, about 65% of our claimants could go online and self-service. Now it's 97. And because of that, we're able to answer about 42% more calls a day to those folks that aren't able to self-service. The third one, and I think this is one of the most critical ones, is data migration. So you can imagine that accurate and timely information is paramount to any agency, any organization. And it's not just for like reporting to our stakeholders, but it's to make sure that employers pay their fair share of their taxes, claimants receive their benefits that they're entitled to on time. And also so myself and my leadership team can make information, not just data-driven decisions. And so we executed this in terms of months of data mapping. As I mentioned earlier, we had multiple systems of record. People weren't sure what that one source of truth was. And so we took our IT folks, and more importantly, our business folks, in a room and just spent, again, months data mapping. And I want to emphasize that a lot of folks think that the data and data mapping is an IT function. It's really not. They're there for support. These business rules and information is really driven by business. At the end of that, we started doing our data testing migration. So over this 29-month period, we had 10 data migrations. So that's one every quarter. And that was very intentional so that we could time it. We could see how many records were supposed to go in, how many got rejected. And then along parallel to that, we actually did 5 full test migrations of the whole system. So pretended to bring everything down, do the data migration, get everything up and running. And so between the data migrations and the 5 full test migrations, that brought us to a 99.6% success rate. So out of 5.5 million records brought over, we only had about 12,000 that didn't come over, and we knew they weren't going to come over because we'd done all those data test migrations. And then the fourth one, I think, is just that collaboration, focus, kind of our subject matter expertise. We really had to do a mindset change that the system is never going to be 100% perfect, 100% ready. We need to quit investing in that old system and turn over to the new system as quickly as possible, which allowed us to get to that 29 months versus the 3 to 5 years that other states had been seeing. But if we had accepted that framework, kind of that minimum viable product, and have a map to keep modifying, upgrading, and adapting, we would be successful. And that's what we're doing. And we're never going to stop doing that. One of the key aspects that we did was our subject matter expertise. We actually lifted them up and out of their everyday jobs so that they could focus on this migration. And so having people to be able to be free and available for that project, to rely on their expertise, got us prepared from the very beginning to do all of the things that we needed to do to get through this incredible transformation. And then lastly, the kind of the cultural shift to perpetual adaptation. We're not just modernized, we're always going to be modernizing, right? We saw with the old system that was on life support, we needed to keep it running, but the new system, we've designed that framework to adapt to those changes in technology and constituent demands, policy changes. And then as new technology becomes available, we're able to more quickly implement that. So just a few examples, we hear about AI at least 50 times a day, right? But we're actually developing plans for virtual agents, more secure fraud and prevention and detection, additional security features, real-time data reporting, informational decisions, automation. It's really exciting. We haven't ever been, as an agency and probably even the state, in this position. So to be leaders in the forefront with unemployment insurance is very exciting for our team.
Right. Yeah. Whoever has your job in 2060 will not be cursing you the way I'm sure that you were people in the 70s. So, okay, that's great. And then in terms of the system's uptime, or its sort of overhead, I guess, its capacity, God forbid we have another pandemic. Are you guys in good shape in terms of that system?
Yeah. That's a great question. That is one of the foundational controls that we had when we started developing, is to know that if there were, 1 million calls coming in, or if the federal government suddenly implemented 7 new unemployment insurance systems like they did during the pandemic, that we were ready to go, but also that when we were ready, we'd be able to easily scale down.
Right. Last question. Did you face any challenges that you think would be illuminating for other states?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's great to think about that, because as we were chatting before, I truly believe in kind of building that cohort and network of people, always being curious and willing to learn. So if I could impart anything on folks, it would probably be these 4 things. One is build those relationships and protect your subject matter experts. Without those stakeholders, we would not have been successful. Again, it was just them understanding, the need and the urgency and the strategy that we had. Invest in your data, data, not only for just the integrity of that system, but if everybody's wanting to move to AI, you're not going to be successful with AI without data integrity. It's never going to be perfect, so don't let that be the crutch that you don't allow things to move forward, that you don't allow those cultural shifts. You will get there. It will never, ever be done. So don't ever stop moving forward and adapting. That would be my final piece of advice.
That was Amber Shultz, Secretary of the Kansas Department of Labor. That's it for this episode. You can subscribe to the Priorities Podcast at prioritiespodcast.com. This recording is a production of Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher helped put it together. I'm Colin Wood. Thanks for listening.